Hi, everybody. I'm Reverend David Girth. I'm the Executive Director of Metropolitan Congregations United, and I'm with Reverend Dr. Wendy Bruner, who's the pastor of Peace United Church of Christ and the president of MCU's board. And Reverend Bruner's been part of building some really exciting work in Webster Groves and in other places. And I've invited her to just talk with us a minute about what's going on in her congregation and the monthly membership assembly. So, Wendy, talk to us a minute about what the membership assembly is for you and why is it important to participate for you as a pastor?
Well, so one of the things that I would say is that there's this coming together in the assembly gives us opportunity to connect with other congregations. And that's really important. But I think I need to step back just a little bit to talk about why we would be even involved in the first place. And I think what's really important for folks to know is that when Peace became part of MCU, at the same time we were doing some work with Deaconess and Children's Defense Fund with Freedom School. It's a 6-week learning program in the summer. And in that intersection, the congregation realized that we needed to do more than just think and talk about justice and doing justice in the world, and that we actually needed to act, right, through those relationships with Freedom School scholars and their families, and then connecting with MCU and the work that MCU was doing. And it just so happened that right around that same time, MCU was working with Medicaid expansion, collecting signatures. What a great way for our congregation to connect, to build momentum and energy around something that was very important to not only our congregation, but the Freedom School scholars that we were supporting during the summer and spending time with. And what was wonderful about that opportunity was not only that our congregation got excited and energized to do this work, but we began connecting with other congregations around this same issue, around Medicaid expansion. And we built relationships there too. And it's amazing to see what happens, right, when congregations come together and the power that we can create together. It's so much more than just one congregation doing the work alone. So the assembly is that monthly way of doing that, making those connections, coming together to talk about particular issues, finding other congregations that are interested in doing the same thing or passionate about doing the same thing. And as a pastor, though it is another Tuesday evening now that I am spending time away from my home, it's also really important, right? Because it's an opportunity for me to connect with other pastors, to find that energy that is a synergy, right? That comes together when we are more than one person. Sometimes being a pastor can seem so isolating. And when we come together as pastors, we realize that there are other folks who are passionate about the same things we are, that we're not in this alone. And that assembly can provide that space for that to happen. So not only are we doing the work in that space, but we are building relationships with other pastors in that space and other congregations in that space.
Wendy, we had an assembly just the other night, and I heard that there were a couple of folks from your congregation who were there. And I think one maybe was there for the first time. And one was one of the people who first really got involved between MCU and Peace. And the takeaway from both of them was, I'm a lot clearer at the end of this night about what I'm going to do next or what we're going to do together next than I was before. Can you say a word about what happened with them that got them that clarity versus where they were at the beginning of the evening?
Well, so the one in particular that I'm thinking about, it was just clear he went to a particular group talking about next steps in the work that we're doing. And I think, you know, how often we are so involved in thinking about what we can do, and there's all these different places that we can be putting our time into. He became clear in that group session that he needed to strategize about next steps, that it was very intentional, this work, and that it wasn't just this kind of all over the place kind of work that needed to get done, that he needed to be clear about where his self-interest was, what he was passionate about, and then take the steps and focus in on that. And I think that was what became really clear to him in that particular meeting. And he's been part of MCU for as long as I've been part of MCU, right? So that's the other piece. I think it doesn't matter how long we've been involved, we could always be figuring things out and doing the work better.
And he didn't have to figure out the next steps by himself. He was doing it with a group of people that were maybe wrestling with some of the same stuff.
Well, sure. And then he can be building those relationships with those folks, and they can do some of that work together. And I think that's the other piece, right? There's some accountability at the end of that session, right? People are saying that here's what we're going to do. And then the next session we come back and it's like, have you done the work? You need to be accountable for what you say you're going to be doing. And if you're alone doing that, it's really easy to push that aside and say, I just didn't have time for it this week or whatever it is. So that monthly assembly, one of the things I heard the other night in the assembly was, so what are the steps that you're going to take? And what have you asked the rest of us to do here tonight? And when we come back next month, we need to tell you what we've done around that work, right? So it wasn't even just in the small group, it became the whole assembled group together that was going to be accountable for some work that the one person wanted to do. I'm not sure if that.
Not just momentum, but magnified momentum, right? We could see, I don't want to do everything.
We talk about that all the time, right? Like, we need to get people there, right? We need to have more people because people are power. We just cannot do it alone. So this idea of pastors going it alone, it being a very lonely position to hold, right? That's a myth that doesn't need to actually, it doesn't actually need to happen, right? We can be gathered together to do this work, and it doesn't have to be all on our own. In fact, it can't be all on our own or it won't get done.
I want to ask you one last question. Your congregation, PCUCC, has made some very bold decisions about your ministry and how you're going to do it. And I've heard from you and from others there that part of that is because your culture has evolved toward being clear and bold with each other and making decisions and following through them. Can you say a little bit more about those decisions and what organizing that looks like it's got nothing to do with what's going on inside the four walls has actually shaped what happens inside the four walls?
Right. So the congregation made the decision about this time last year that we would sell our property on the corner of Lockwood and Plant in Webster Groves, and we would move. We have now moved to Eden Theological Seminary, where we are housed. So we're selling our property. The reason that we did that, it's a really interesting thing, and you don't think about it being organizing, but it really is. The governing body, our church council, made the decision that the people were drivers of the vision and mission, not the building itself, not the property. That the property we could utilize the property to do our vision and mission, but it was not our vision and mission. The people were, and so that the people needed to have priority. And so to do that, we made the decision that we would not spend our time worrying about a plant, like a physical plant, that we would worry about how we as people were going to create to do our vision and mission, which is so heavily tied, right, with the work of MCU and the kind of organizing work that's being done. So it is a bold move, but it's actually exactly what should have happened as we were having this conversation, right? It's not a surprise, really. It's just the way we're moving, right, as we are trying to live out this understanding of who we are.
Yeah, and what I'm really excited about is the way that clarity, that boldness, that commitment inside of Peace is also drawing other congregations in Webster, and that you all are really, it's not simply you aligning with MCU, but you're creating models and examples and agitations for other communities about how they can work together in their own context, around their own relationships and their own issues. So it's an exciting time for us, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience with anybody who's going to see this video. Thanks.
Thank you.
I can't find her. Turn it
Jeez, I was going to say, how do I need to look for how much longer, right? Can I now drink a cup of